Hello and welcome to this Chess Club game review featuring the Jabava London system. So I played this game recently at the local chess club against Dave, who is, I believe, an 1800 player. So let's see what happens here. I begin with d4 and he responds with d5, so we each take an equal share of the center. And d4, d5 games are usually more strategic and a little bit less tactical. But of course, any opening could become more or less tactical depending how you play. All right, so knight to c3 here. We put a little bit of pressure on that pawn, also threaten to maybe push this pawn. So Dave responds with knight to f6 here, helping to fight for control of this square. All right, so now we have bishop to f4, and this is the Jabava London system, named after Badur Jabava, who used this system quite a bit. Now, in the computer here, this is called the Queen's Pawn opening Chigorin variation, and this opening has been around for quite some time, and before Badur Jabava's time, but he became famous for playing this variation, and so more recently the opening is named after him. So what does this opening do? Well, it has the potential for you to jump your knight up to b5 and apply pressure along with the bishop to this pawn, threatening a possible fork. So, what does Dave do? He prevents me from being able to jump that knight forward. So c6 is played. A book move fortifies the center and prevents any play against this c7 square. All right, so e3, this is a common move in the Jabava London system. You fortify your central pawn, you protect the bishop. That way, if at some point the bishop comes under attack and is traded off, you could recapture possibly with the e pawn. And then by doing that, you kind of have a good lockdown with both of these pawns on this e5 square. So that's one of the strategies in the Jabava London system. If somebody goes after this pawn, you might think, oh, well, I don't want to double my pawns up, but it does help you maintain control of this e5 square. All right, so Dave plays knight at b to d7, and so far, the game is going good for both sides. This move kind of blocks in the bishop, but it seems like it's okay. It also maybe helps threaten a future pawn push here where you can attack this valuable d4 pawn. So now I respond with bishop to d3, another common move, and now I'm covering the e4 square, preventing that knight from dropping in there. And then I could possibly push my e pawn and attack their d5 pawn as well. So the game continues with b6, the first inaccuracy of the game. So, what does the computer like? Apparently, the computer likes a6 better, and that could be another possibility in the Jabava London system where black pushes the pawn to a6 and then brings this pawn up and tries to start some action over here on the queen side. But in this game, it looks like Dave is preparing to fianchetto the bishop, and then he would be aiming down towards my king side, even though there's a lot of pawns in between. In the future, if those clear out, there could be a possibility of an attack, especially if I castle over there. So I just continue with development, and it looks like I've followed up an inaccuracy of my own. So let's see here. If instead I play with the computer likes h4, so if I would push this pawn up, I guess that would try and gain some space on the king side. And pushing of the G and H pawns, that's another theme in the Jabava London. Now, I'm still learning the Jabava London system. I read the Jabava London system book by, I believe, Simon Williams. But I do need to go through that book again because there was a lot of material in there. And so I'm still improving with this opening. Alex Bonzea, I think that's how you pronounce his name. He has a good YouTube channel as well that covers a lot about the Jabava London system. So you might want to check that out as well. All right, so after knight to f3, we have fianchetto of the bishop, and white is still ahead here, pretty decent. I castle, and once again, they wanted me to push this h pawn to try and get some attack rolling over here on the king side. As these pawns have already been pushed on the queen side, it's more likely for black to castle over on the king side. But I kind of played it safe because this Dave is a pretty tough player, and so I probably shouldn't have gone with the strategy that I did to trade down material. I kind of steered the game, towards a draw, I guess, and you probably don't want to do that with the Jabava London system because you can have opportunities for some good attacks. So e6 was played, the best move. This will allow the bishop to develop and black to castle kingside. So here I played kind of a defensive move. Now if my bishop is attacked, I have the opportunity to drop back if I want to. Maybe my king could escape off the back rank if it has to at some point. All right, bishop is developed. And now I centralize my rook, but it looks like I've kind of let my advantage fizzle away. Now the game's almost even again. So castling is best for black. And then it looks like here, the only move to keep the game even and not allow black to go ahead is for me to retreat the knight here. So I've had viewers in the past ask about this knight on c3. In the regular London system, the knight will go to d2 often, and that allows you to push the c-pawn. But what's the difference? In the Jabava London, you move here to c3 with the knight, and it controls more of the center. It kind of applies pressure, I guess, to this pawn. It could allow you to push your e pawn. It also helps prevent the knight from jumping into e4. But here, and this is another theme in the Jabava London, often you may have to drop the knight back, and that's what it recommends here, knight to e2, and then that frees up my c-pawn to either fortify the center by pushing to c3, or trying to attack maybe with c4. So the game continues with an inaccuracy by me, and now Dave has taken the advantage here, or moved ahead as far as the computer is concerned. But, it's not a big lead yet. Computer preferred an immediate e4. So it looks like instead I should have tried this. I was worried about doing that, kind of opening the center up and allowing this bishop more activity. So that's the main reason I didn't play that. But, if I would have played that, we would have exchanged in the center, exchanged off some pieces. But that was not played. I commit an inaccuracy with queen to e2. The game continues with c5. The best move here, and Dave finds it. So now he has this threat of trapping my bishop here, so that's not so good. So I have to do something. I decide to trade off his fianchettoed bishop with bishop to a6. So I attack. Um, Apparently, they prefer queen to d1, just dropping back and giving that bishop an escape hatch. Um, but yeah, and another thing that it's probably not so great trading off my good bishop for Dave's bad bishop. So, that probably would have been better to keep that bishop. But now we have a capture, recapture, and a funny thing happened in the game here. I guess, I've been playing online mostly, and so I just started getting back into these club games over the board, and we use the clock and write the moves down. And at this point in the game, I must have been writing my move down, and I didn't see Dave make his next move here, queen to c8. And then I looked up, and I thought it was still his move, and that he hadn't moved yet. And I was thinking, what? He can just take my queen for free. And so I told him, well, I probably ought to just resign right now since you can take my queen. And, he was probably wondering, what? And yeah, then I realized, that he just moved his queen, and we all laughed about it, because it was kind of ridiculous. So, if you haven't played over the board and you want to play in over the board tournaments, and you're rusty, make sure you get some practice in just to get in the habit of writing the moves down and hitting the clock. And, then hopefully you won't have any weird incidents like this one. So, here it would have been better to retreat my queen. But something that players do sometimes when they go up against a strong opponent, they try and trade down material because they figure, well, that's less material that my stronger opponent has to use to attack me with. And that can be a mistake. So I made a mistake here of trading, and that just helped my opponent develop another piece here, one of his rooks. So now if we look at the score, black is ahead pretty good, almost the equivalent of half a pawn. So here I try to centralize my rook, maybe get ready to fight for this c file if things open up. He's probably going to capture here, and then I want to move my knight back, and after he captures, though, I'll capture here, but I wanted to move my knight back and then be able to push this pawn, and so the rook here defends that pawn on c2. All right, so the game continued with capture, recapture. Of course, I don't want to capture with the knight, or there could be maybe a possibility of a fork, if this pawn pushes forward attacking my bishop and knight. So often in the Jabava, you want to recapture with the e3 pawn and capture on d4 if that c pawn picks off your d pawn. All right, so the attack continues here by pushing the rook forward, putting a little bit of pressure on this pawn, getting ready to swing the other one in. So I gotta act quickly here. I drop back, then I can push this forward and kind of block his rooks. So the knight jumps in first, which is best. And I had a viewer asking about weak squares and how to take advantage of them. What do you do when your opponent has a weak square, or if I have a weak square here? And what is a weak square? It's a square that you can take advantage of in your opponent's position, or like this, they can take advantage of it in your position, and you can't attack that square with a pawn. Now here it's temporary. I could move my knight and then push this pawn up, attacking and driving that knight away. So this is a temporary weak square. So I fortify the center, and now that'll allow me time to get ready to maybe drop a knight back and try and kick this knight out of here with either a capture or pushing this pawn up. So the rooks double on the half open file. That's usually a good strategy. And now there's going to be the issue of, these pawns pushing up the board here and applying pressure here to this C3 square. And so I drop back trying to get that knight out of the outpost that it's on. And we have a capture, recapture, and now the bishop centralizes, and the computer doesn't like that as much. What was preferred? It looks like just h6, which would limit the scope of the bishop, and then maybe prepare to push this pawn up and limit that bishop even more. So I decide to fight my opponent, trying to get rid of my bad bishop, which could be blocked in by all these squares, or all these pawns on the dark squares. And so here we exchange. I get rid of his good bishop, and after the recapture, now the game is pretty even. Black might still have a slight edge, so let's see what black does next. Well, as I mentioned, these pawns can start pushing forward. So after b5, the computer says that's an excellent move. a5 would have been good as well. Black has a slight edge. So I drop my knight back, and now, I have the possibility in the future maybe of pushing that knight forward. This also helps prevent that pawn from pushing forward. And at the moment, I can't bring my knight up to e5 or c5, or his knight would just capture. So the best move is found by Dave. And what now? I'm sorry, Dave. I can't let you do that. So if you've ever seen Space Odyssey, 2001 A Space Odyssey, where the computer tries to stop Dave, so that's what I do here. I try to stop him from pushing to b4. So we have a3, and along with this knight and the pawns, it kind of locks things down. Because that could be dangerous. And we'll see what happens here a little bit later in the game. I do get in trouble because I traded my knight off, or the knights, and allowed Dave to push forward here. And that gave him an advantage, as we'll see. But for the moment, things are pretty even. So the kings start activating, and that can be very important in the end game when you're dwindling down to a few pieces on the board. So I try to get my king into the action. The king steps up, and now I decide, since my opponent has both his rooks doubled on the half open file, I'm going to try and do the same on this half open E file. And the computer says it probably would have been better to just push up to G4. But, this rook move is still an excellent move, apparently. Dave drops back, and the computer didn't like that as much. Now the game has swung back in white's favor. So what is preferred? Oh, wow. King to f6, bringing the king further up the board. That then you will have to think twice about pushing pawns up, because the king can kind of get up here into the action quicker than your king that's stuck back on f1. So instead, we have the rook dropping back. I get ready to double my rooks up. The king moves up into the center, which is a good move, but the computer prefers bringing this knight forward instead. So I double the rooks, and now Dave does bring his knight forward, with the possibility of jumping up here to c4, maybe attacking here. Um, so, now it's interesting. A few or even one different move in the position can change what move is best or not best. So, a moment ago, knight to b6 was the best move. Now it's saying h5 is a better move, just grabbing space on the king side. But, these moves are all really close and they don't make too much of a difference in the position. You just have to find what your preferences are, depending on your playing style. All right, so here I push this pawn forward, preparing to give my king an area or a way to move up into the game and get closer towards the center for the end game. And apparently f4 would have been better. So, and I thought about that in the game, but I was thinking, well, if I go up to f4, he might be able to remaneuver his knight, onto that e4 square. So, by leaving, and see right now, he drops back. He could go here and then move to e4 if I would have pushed up here to f4. So that's the main reason I kept that pawn on f3 there. So the game continues with my king trying to get into the game. And here we have the best move being found. At this point, white is slightly ahead. So I decide to gain space on the king side. And the computer says that's fine, but maybe g4 would have been a little bit better. So we have equalization of space on the king side with h4 and h5. And here, apparently, knight to f4 attacking the unprotected pawn. The computer likes that a little bit better. After g3, it looks like black slightly has an edge, but pretty much the game is even. So here we have rook protecting this pawn. And I'm not sure what Dave was thinking here. If he just wanted to protect that pawn, maybe plan to move up here and try and swing over at some point, or push some pawns. But we didn't get to that. Here is an inaccuracy. So this is where I got myself in trouble in the game. If we go back, what should I have done? Computer likes king to g2, which was just kind of a waiting move. Maybe that's what I should have done. Just maneuvered my king around. Maybe up here. Could have gone ahead and pushed that pawn anyway. And then threatened to push the other pawn up. Or just, when you're not sure what to do sometimes, and everything's about even, sometimes you can just maneuver around and your opponent will give you a mistake move. That doesn't always happen, but it looks like it would have been better just to maneuver my king. So after this move, this is an inaccuracy, because the one move that allows black to go ahead is to exchange off here. And then it looks like it's about even whether I capture with the rook or the pawn. I thought about the pawn, but I don't know. Maybe that would have been a better move. But then I'd probably have to push up here. Either way, I should not have gotten rid of the knights. I should have kept my knight, because that knight was playing a very good defensive system, I guess. It was doing a good job on defense of guarding this and preventing these pawns from pushing forward, and that's how I get in trouble now. So I capture with the rook. Um, and now it's saying that the pawn capture would have been better because it would have put my opponent's king in check. But then I thought, well, he could possibly then move his king down here into the position. But, if that was done, I guess I don't know. Let's take a quick look at that. So if I would have gone here, where should the king go? So they don't even recommend bringing the king down here to c5. Oh, okay. Yeah, that would be an awful move at first. Well, no. I was thinking you could attack the rook, but then the rook could capture here. So, and that is one of the recommended moves. All right. King to c5 is a possibility. So, yeah, I guess you could go ahead and try that, but apparently king back up to e7 is not a bad move. Um, the computer recommends that first. All right, I had a I had a viewer ask about, maybe I should use a script, and I don't know. A lot of these videos I probably can't use a script because I'm kind of going over things as the computer brings them up, and especially the problems. I do problems that just pop up and I don't know what the problem's going to be. I don't solve them ahead of time and record it. I just play the videos as or excuse me, record as I'm playing the game or going over a game or solving puzzles. So it's a little bit harder to have a script if you do that. So I'll try and limit the uhs and ums. I know that can be annoying. So let's get on with it here. We have this pawn. It pushes forward to g6, protecting the h5 pawn, relieving this rook of guard duty. So now, apparently that was a mistake. And I think that's the first actual mistake of the game. We had some inaccuracies, and it looks like, oh wow, rook to a1. Okay, this is an instructive moment. The computer likes rook to a1 the best. Now why? Why rook to a1 instead? Well, it looks like the plan for Dave is to push forward here and break these pawns apart and make them easier targets. So if I would have gone with rook to a1, if this pawn pushes forward, I capture, he recaptures. Well, now it gives my rook more activity. I could move up here, attacking. Then I could even drop back or move here immediately and just protect the pawn from the side. I wouldn't want to put a rook, maybe off here to c1. Okay, if there's a rook here on c1 and the opponent doubles up the rooks, there could be a possibility, especially if this rook on c1 were not protected, of capturing, and then if I capture, the second rook could pick off my rook here on c1. So that's something you have to watch out for if you're playing rook endgames. Okay, so we saw that rook to a1 would have been the better move. And if that is played, let's see, if we go back, what did we actually play that? So if instead we played rook to a1, that would be best. The opponent should follow up with maybe a king move, or, oh, this is an interesting option. You could go here with the rook, and then if I don't, does that really do anything? If they capture, then he could capture here, but that's probably not the greatest move. The king, or excuse me, the computer recommends king to e7 here, or dropping the rook back to c7. But in the game, I make this mistake, and this allows Dave to continue with a good attack over here, which is pretty instructive. How to play positions with just pawns and few pieces in the end game. So you push forward here, and now I'm in trouble. I capture, we have a recapture, and so I'm going to be down a pawn here. So let's see what happens. Maybe there's a better way to defend. I find the best move of bringing my rook down, but after doubling of the rooks, here, what is best? Rook to d3, apparently. Rook to d2. So either one is okay. Rook to e1. I play this move, and this is a mistake here. So, after that mistake move, we'll see what happens. But what should I have played? Rook to d2. So apparently they prefer that. Rook to d2. Then the game could continue with capture. And what do they recommend? Capture with the rook or the pawn. But either way, they're going to come out, or Dave would come out ahead. And that's what happened in the game. And then here, what do they recommend? That I go ahead and exchange off, and I'm just going to be a pawn down. But being one pawn behind in a rook endgame, it's still possible to draw. So, let's see what actually happened in the game. I start pushing over here, trying to get rid of some pawns because I realize that I'm going to be behind, down by a pawn in the endgame. And when you're down in material, it's usually better to start getting rid of pawns, because then that's less pawns that you have to worry about that could be queened. So capture, recapture, then, Dave grabs the extra pawn over here. So here, what would be best? A rook move or king move? So instead, I pick this move. I thought, well, maybe I can get a passed pawn going since I'm behind. Maybe I can get some counterplay over here or trade off more pawns. So after capture, which is best, recapture, I have the passed pawn. And now Dave is ahead, and he figures, well, if I'm ahead in material, I should go ahead and just trade down pieces, which is usually what you want to do, but it looks like this is a mistake here. And to keep the advantage, because he still has an advantage, but it's a lot smaller now, I have a much bigger chance of drawing after this exchange of rooks. So apparently king to e7 would have been the best move. And then what do they recommend? King to g2 or rook to e1. Let's pick the best move and see if it still is. Now it's saying that's an inaccuracy, that rook to e1 would have been better. So if I go here with rook to e1, looks like rook to c2 check. But anyway, you see a much bigger advantage for black if he would have kept both rooks. And, rook endgames can be very difficult. So, you can't really fault Dave for you know, having an inaccuracy or a mistake in this end game, because I have a few in this end game as well, as we'll see. But let's get to the end of it here before the video drags out too long. We see that if both rooks are kept, it looks like it would be better for black. Now they're saying to bring the king up. Okay, and then I should play rook to g1 to prevent the king, to cut off the king. Then after check, what? We should block, capture. I don't know. This whole line looks bad because, if we go here, king captures, well, now you can check. And then what? King up to f3. It's going to be hard to defend both of these isolated pawns. They recommend getting behind the passed pawn, which is usually a great idea. So the king would have to defend. And what now? King up to g7. The king could try and swing over here, but if I go here, we have what? King to f4 check is recommended. I don't know. It's looking terrible for black here. So let's go back a little bit. And that's why these endgames can be so difficult. That's what they recommend. Now they're saying that's an inaccuracy. Rook to e1. But, what if I go ahead and exchange like that? Then we have capture. Then I kind of have to get behind my passed pawn. So the king has to go, or sorry, I have to prevent the rook from getting behind my passed pawn. But now that could come under attack. So, all right, you see how bad things would have been if instead in the game, if this trade would have been delayed. Because now I make another mistake here. I capture this way, and that's a missed opportunity. My position is better, but not great. It would have been better to capture with the king. So if I would have done that, and then, well, now you can see the game is much closer to being even. They recommend swinging the king up here, maybe trying to get the king involved over here. My king can protect this pawn. My rook could try and get behind my passed pawn and help march it up the board. So, back to the beginning of the series of mistakes here. That trade should not have happened. Then I follow up with a missed opportunity. And then this is a missed opportunity. Apparently, keeping the rook on the open file and swinging the king back up here to e7. Let's look at this a little bit. King up to e7. Then the recommendation is what? Rook to f3 to prevent the king from coming out to f6 and going after my pawn. So you kind of cut off the king. Rook to h8 immediately goes after the pawn. So now you're forced to go to h3 to protect that pawn. This allows the king to come out. So we should get our king moving. And what now? Yeah, it looks like black had a chance to win here. So in the game, that's a missed opportunity there. I get behind the pawn, which is the best move, it looks like. So he blockades the pawn, preventing it from pushing forward. But wow, it looks like rook to a8 might have been better. Because that would prevent my king. If this rook would have swung over here, and if I try to push my pawn, ooh, I don't know, it's still a dangerous position. There's a chance of going after my king and harassing the king from the side here, I guess. Huh. All right. Yeah, there's just so much that can happen in these rook endgames. So let's finish it up here. We have a blockading move. I try to get my king in the action. Apparently, it would have been better just to go here with the king to f3. So this was an inaccuracy. And at this point, the game is pretty much even. So I just capture, recapture, and I move here. The computer says that's best because it cuts off the king from being able to come forward. It also prevents this pawn from being able to check me and make progress, or I can just capture it. So Dave finds the best move. I drop back, and apparently king to f3 would have been fine, but I didn't want his king coming forward. And I thought, well, he could push one of his pawns forward, which is what he did. So I go here to prevent the other pawn from coming forward. And now we have this move. So what if, if this pawn pushed forward, I guess it would be hard to defend because I could just go here and attack it. So the other pawn pushes, and the computer likes rook to h7 better here. Kind of a waiting move. But if that happens, I would probably just push my pawn up even further, I guess. So capture, capture. And now that gives me the opportunity to drop my king, well, push my king forward. And from here I can start unleashing checks on my opponent's king and cause him problems. But before I do that, he checks me, and that's the best move. And it looks like the game is just a draw here if I don't make any big mistakes. So I drop my king back, getting ready to blockade the pawn. We have a check. I get in front of the passed pawn with my king, and yeah, it looks like it's a draw here. So rook steps away. I would think, why not go all the way to h3? Yeah, it says that's best because you'd be even further away from the king. So now I just check. The king starts thinking about going up here after my rook, but I immediately attack the pawn, and this is where we had a draw because now the pawn will have to be protected. If the rook tries to protect, well, my king can move up and attack. If the king steps up here to protect the pawn, well, then I just start checking. So I can just check the king back and forth. And if he gets away from the pawn, then I can try and go after the pawn. So we just agreed to a draw here. And if I look at the game review, this is interesting. It looks like the game was pretty much even for the first, oh man, over half of the game was even. And then once I traded that knight off and got myself in trouble, I let Dave get that extra pawn. He could have had enough to win there, as we saw. But I'm lucky to have escaped with a draw there at the end. And it says that I played with 92.5% accuracy and Dave played with 92.6. All right. Oh, I got to cut out them ums. I'm sorry about that. So here, inaccuracies. 4 for me, 3 for Dave. I had 2 mistakes. He had 1, and we both had 1 miss. And the computer says that we played with 2450 rating levels. Both of us did, so 2450 for both of us. In the opening, 95% accuracy for me, 96.2 for Dave. And as I mentioned, he's a higher level player than I am, so I'll take a draw from him. Here we have 96.4 in the middle game, 96.6 for Dave, 87.6 in the end game. So maybe I played the end game a little more accurate, but he played the opening and middle game a little bit better. All right. Well, feel free to leave comments, like, and subscribe to support the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for watching and have a super chess day.